Hello, hello. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure, un gusto saludarlos hoy. Gracias por su tiempo y compartir con nosotros este ratito que va a estar alegre. It's going to be a good time today. So today we have a very, very interesting talk with Mr. Jeromy Risner. I'm going to present him in a little bit. Maybe before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the things. Voy a empezar hablando un poco. Vamos a tener la conversación en inglés, pero aquí hay un QR que si lo llenan, si lo escanean con su teléfono van a poder ver la traducción en tiempo real. También lo tengo aquí en mi imagen, lo pueden escanear. You can scan this and then pueden leer la transcripción en tiempo real y si se ponen audífonos la pueden escuchar. Y si tienen dudas, pueden entrar aquí al chat, ¿verdad? Entonces, today's talk is going to be in English, but it's going to have simultaneous translation using the app that I just put there it's on the QR. You can scan it here, so you can have it your phone, and you can see it live. I have it here, so everybody can see it. It's live, and it's translating, okay? You can also put headphones, pueden ponerse audífonos y la escuchan. Si tienen alguna duda, preguntan, ¿verdad? Con mucho gusto. Así que, si no hay más, vamos a comenzar. So first of all, we're going to have a conversation today about how can we apply AI, artificial intelligence, to MRO inventory, maintenance, repair, and optimization. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about the projects, how do they go. But what I'm really excited about today is to talk to this man that has many years of experience, who's, I call him the sensei because he's always teaching. He's one of those guys that, kind of the Jedi masters that has seen a lot of wars and he expels a lot of wisdom. So Jeromy, welcome to our podcast today. We appreciate having you. Thanks for your time, buddy. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, so before we get started, we have folks coming in from different places. So I'm going to ask here in the chat, from which country they are attending. I'm right now in Guatemala. I'm going to put it on the chat. And then everybody can join in. Oh, Thorson Caicos. That's amazing. Welcome. Panama. Woohoo. Guatemala. Amazing. Where are you located today, Jeromy?
I'm in Georgia, southern U.S., where it's nice and warm.
Wow, we got people from Colombia, Granada, Mexico, Chile, Mexico, Guate. That's great. So everybody's welcome. Bienvenidos todos. Brazil, Georgia, amazing. So Jeromy, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience? And I think that really makes it exciting when you explain to the people what's your background and what you've been doing lately.
Sure. Yeah, gladly. So yeah, I'm Jeromy Risner. Like I said, I live in Rome, Georgia. It's north of Atlanta, a little ways towards Chattanooga. But yeah, my background is maintenance and reliability for almost 40 years. I was in the chemical plants when I was 16. So yeah, 40 years in maintenance and reliability, from turning wrenches to implementing predictive maintenance programs to teaching maintenance best practices. But the past 10 years have been specifically focused on the unique challenges of MRO inventory. So all those years in maintenance, if we didn't have the right part, the right place at the right time, we lost production, and that was painful. So I've chosen to focus these past 10 years specifically on those unique challenges with MRO inventory. I lead the solutions engineering team at Verison. It's located in Atlanta. We're a global presence. But yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I do.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that, Jeromy. We appreciate it. And if by the way, in the meantime, anybody has any questions, feel free to ask or comment or react to. We want to keep this as mostly interactive as we can. And I'm René Nazario. I'm the CEO of Visual K. We also have a presence in US, Central America, Caribbean, Mexico, and then South America. I've been leading the company for over 20 years now, and then we started a while back, over 20 years, managing, helping customers improve their processes in maintenance operations. And a few years back, we became partners of Versant, which has been a great experience for us and joining this great family. And today we're going to talk a little bit about this type of project. So our focus today, it's really about AI, artificial intelligence, and how does that, how can we apply that in when we talk about projects. So to get started, Jeromy, when we talk about AI and MRO, which is refacción and repuestos, inteligencia artificial, what are the expectations, right? That when you go out there and talk to the folks that you talk on a day-to-day basis all over the world. You were telling me that you were talking with some folks in Asia, Brazil. You got people over. What are the expectations and what do you see out there?
Yeah, sure. The most common expectation, especially in the last year or two, is that you can take an AI model or an AI tool, point it at your MRO inventory data, and get reliable answers right away. Basically, think of it like flipping a switch, but that's the expectation. But the reality is much messier than that. And anybody on the call that's been in maintenance or operations knows that MRO demand doesn't behave like a normal planning kind of problem. It's lumpy, it's intermittent. Think of corrective and emergency work and things like that. That's what we stock for, right? We don't stock tons of inventory, tens of millions of dollars in inventory for things that are very well planned. In those situations, you buy what you need when you need it. So the reason companies carry millions and tens of millions of dollars in inventory is for the unexpected. So if MRO demand is lumpy and intermittent, then throwing a very normalized model at it to understand the data is the expectation. But again, reality is much messier than that. So lead times swing wildly. Demand and usage is lumpy and unpredictable. We change suppliers very frequently. A massive amount of the real value in inventory optimization depends on criticality. And that's oftentimes an overlooked element. It is understanding. I mean, think about like a $5 part, like a coupling insert, or a fastener or something that's tied to a very critical production asset. But then you might have a $10,000 part that's sitting on the shelf and you're not even sure where it's used, right? So understanding criticality plays a big role, but the dangerous expectation is that you can throw a generic AI model at the data without accounting for those variables. And then assuming that this open source model is going to get you reproducible results without bias, right? And with understanding all these nuances. That's the dangerous expectation. So that's what I run into often. And if you don't have a reproducible result with a clear explanation, understanding of how you got to that result without bias, if you don't have that, just keep in mind that the output is potentially cutting a purchase order for that $10,000 part, right? Or potentially stocking out of that $5 critical part that's going to cost you a lot of downtime and lost production. Those are the expectations, and those are the dangers and what I'm seeing lately.
Wow, super interesting. So yeah, what you're telling us, Jeromy, is that you see a lot out there that folks basically take their data, they throw it at any model, whatever it's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and then they try to have reproducible results that are taking into account all those considerations that you mentioned, which is not, it's not necessarily what those models are necessarily built from scratch, right?
Right, and remember, I think we've all experienced this in recent years. AI will give you an answer.
Always.
Confidence is not the same as correctness, right?
Right.
And understanding how it got to that answer, right, and being able to reproduce it. Because I ask AI one thing today, and I can phrase it almost identically tomorrow and get two different answers. You don't want to take that kind of risk with your critical spare parts.
Right, right. And I guess that leads us to the next subject is, from your experiences, what are the most common reasons why this, AI MRO projects for inventory fail?
Yeah, that's a fair question. In my experience, almost always it traces back to treating MRO inventory like any other AI or demand planning kind of problem, instead of treating it like the unique problem it actually is. And I'm sure we're going to talk about, this topic's going to resonate throughout our conversation, but teams tend to skip the material criticality piece, and that's very important. Now, what happens when you skip material criticality? Well, now you're optimizing based on volume, right? And what do insurance spares? What do the most critical spares do, right? They sit on a shelf and you hope you never need it. But what does that usage look like? It's flat. There's no usage, right? So understanding that it's still critical, you must have it, right? Versus stocking based on volume, where you might be overstocking materials just because usage is high. I think a lot of maintenance related people on the call, right? When we think about maintenance strategies, right? There's all sorts of maintenance strategies, predictive maintenance and PMs and other things. But run to failure is also a very acceptable strategy when it's intentional.
It is, right?
When it's intentional, right?
Right.
And the same thing with stocking out of materials. Sometimes it's perfectly acceptable, but when you stock based on normal demand planning kind of methods, you tend to overstock. When there are materials, it's perfectly okay to run to failure. It's perfectly okay to stock out of. So understanding that is very important. And that's where I see a lot of programs fail, is not incorporating criticality. And then understanding that general purpose AI models are not trained on the unique movement patterns, which is oftentimes seldomly moving inventory, and how to interpret that. So that's what I see. And when teams can't trace back why a certain stocking level was implemented, if they can't, you lose trust, you lose confidence, they stop trusting the output, and that's when projects will fail, no matter how good the underlying math is.
Right. So I guess trying to summarize it for the folks out there that are listening and try to get their hair around it. Right now, we see a couple of things. One of them, it's really the way that, just because of the nature of the process and how you're using your MRO, it's not something you can apply the same logic as you would say, let's say, for packaging material or finished good materials or raw materials. It's a completely different game out there, because basically you're hoping that you never get to use it if we're doing it, and then when you need it, you need it. It's not a question of whether I need it or not. So it's a different process on how you plan it. And then the other thing is, you're saying, well, to that process you need to tie the criticality, because without it, then you have no way of determining what is the correct, let's say, variables that need to be taken into account. So when you do that, then you have a model that takes into account the intermittent nature of MRO, at the same time understanding what is the impact based on the criticality. So our model has to be able to take into account those things. Did I get it right?
You nailed it. You nailed it. Yep. Understanding that balance between, tying up excessive amounts of working capital in your inventory, that balance of saying, no, do we have enough or do we have too much? And it depends on what is the business impact, what is the criticality of each and every material.
Yeah, copy that. So now when we talk, about this, then, it's kind of like a myth, right? So if I apply AI, it's going to be magical, right? I'm just gonna take this model, apply it, and then, just they think the problem is just, I don't have any technology to it, so I'm just going to apply some technology to it, or some model that I hear about. But then we start thinking about, well, is the real problem data? I mean, how often do we see that the real problem is not only the model, but it's on the data, and then maybe we need to take that into account.
Yeah, that Renee, that's the number one objection to every client, every prospect I've spoken to in the past 10 years about MRO inventory. The first thing they'll say is, well, our data is not good enough, right? Seriously, that's what I hear time and again. But there's a nuance worth considering here, perception and reality. Plenty of organizations believe their data is bad or their data is not good enough. That's perception. What they mean, oftentimes, so the reality is that they don't have a way to make sense of the data that they already have.
Okay.
So perception and reality, two very different things. A model, not just any open source model, I already explained the risk and the dangers there, but a model that's specifically trained on the nuances of MRO inventory only, not raw materials, not finished goods, not work in progress, not aftermarket parts, specifically trained on MRO, will find signal in data that looks messy to a human.
Okay.
Now it cuts the other way too. Some organizations assume that, hey, this new technology is going to solve all their problems, when maybe they overlook the groundwork and the basics. And what I mean by that is, are you issuing parts, or are you cycle counting them down because you noticed you're missing 10? Are you issuing parts? Are you issuing them to work orders? Are you issuing work orders to assets? So having the foundation in place is still extremely important before you can throw a tool at it and hope that it solves this data problem.
Well, that's really interesting, right? So basically, when we talk about it, it becomes, I guess, a challenge, right? Whether we are able to really take that into account, because I guess every time we talk to a customer, right, or a prospect, we're looking at, is my data in good shape, right? And can I use it to derive real value from it? And I guess the other part of it is, if it's not ready, then let me get it ready, which is going to be never. And then when are you going to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of different things meant by bad data or messy data, but yeah, we'll talk more about it. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but
that's okay. We're good, man. So based on that, can you share maybe an example, Jeromy, of where, even though where the data wasn't perfect, right? Where maybe let's start by sharing an example where data quality limited the expected results, right? Where you went in and you saw that there was an issue there.
Yeah. So both extremes are very important to talk about, but starting with that extreme where the data is a problem, right? And maybe the results you expected weren't achieved or weren't attainable to begin with. So again, data quality to me comes to a few concrete things. Consumption, usage history, is usage being documented? Now, I don't mind if, for me personally, there's an ideal way, but it doesn't have to be ideal. Is there consumption? Ideal would be the parts are issued to work orders are tied to assets, etc. But is there consumption being documented in some way, even if it's issues to cost centers or whatever? Is usage being documented? Do you have descriptions and categorization? Now, I'm not saying are they good, or are they perfect, or are they accurate, but do we at least know that that's a valve? We might not know the material construction. We might not know the exact size. Do you have some sort of descriptor? Do you have a catalog ID, a material ID? Do you have consumption? Those are the foundations. If we have that, then optimization can happen. No catalog, no optimization, right? You're not going to set the right stocking policies if you're buying everything on your procurement card, your P card. But the specific example would be, I did have a client who had recently migrated from one ERP to another one, organization-wide. They had multiple ERPs. They standardized on a single one, and we couldn't help them. And the reason why is they lost all their historical transactions. They didn't carry even like a year's worth of transactions forward. They carried all their master data, lots of transactions, and we couldn't even pull them from a legacy system. So you can't optimize something when you have no visibility. There's nothing for even the AI models to learn from. And then I'll give you one more specific example. This was an oil and gas client down in Houston, based in Houston, and they had a complete and utter disconnect between their ERP and their EAM or CMMS, their maintenance system. So procurement's over here, purchasing materials as they're needed. Maintenance is over here, opening and closing work orders and completing work orders, with zero connection and zero visibility into this part. In the maintenance system is the same as this part that you're ordering. So without that connection, AI models will lose insights onto your procurement. How often do you buy? How many do you buy? What does your lead time look like? And on the other end, you're losing visibility into what does the consumption look like, and where is it used, and how is it used? That all plays a role in criticality. So unfortunately, it's one of those scenarios where we had to walk away because we couldn't provide them with a solution that's going to make them happy. We couldn't solve their problem.
Wow, interesting. So based on that, Jeromy, now we're seeing we launched a survey, una encuesta, and then we got basically like over half say that their data is their standardization of their data it's basically regular, right? So I guess that is something that we see often, right? And I'm pretty sure you've been able to see it. So based in understanding that when you start these projects, usually you don't have perfect data, right? Obviously, you showed an extreme case, but now we know that nobody has really perfect data already, because if they did, maybe they already fixed that problem. What are the signs that can tell us, right, that you think an organization is ready to derive value from an application of artificial intelligence in their MRO stocking policies?
Okay, so we went from like these people were not ready. Now who is ready? So okay, a couple of things I look for. 3, do you have some sort of catalog? In other words, is this material, does it have an identifier? Again, the description doesn't have to be perfect, but do you have a catalog that you're reordering from and that you're issuing against? Okay, so transaction history, a catalog, consumption transaction history, and then third, a clearly articulated pain point, right? In other words, we have too much inventory. Okay, what does that mean, right? Is it causing you pain? In other words, hey, that's money that we can't use for capital projects. It's money we can't use for this and that because we're tied up. It's working capital that's not working. So some clearly articulated pain point, or the opposite. We're having a lot of stock outs. Okay, big deal. Well, it's causing us lost production. Okay, now it's a big deal. It's costing us X thousands of dollars per minute or per hour. Now we've got a pain point, right? So catalog, transactions, and is there a clearly defined pain point? What I would want to steer people away from, there is a common, I think, a misconception, but a common conception that our data needs to be clean, it needs to be perfect, our descriptors, our categorization needs to be great before we can optimize. And I think that's a mistake. I don't think it is a prerequisite, and I've never seen a client yet or a customer yet or a friend yet with perfect data. And when they do go through the effort of cleansing the data 3-4 years later, guess what? You've got 20,000 more messy parts. So you're chasing a moving target without really realizing the benefit that you're probably looking for, which is reducing stockouts. No, let me summarize it. Have the right part in the right place at the right time. You can do that with messy data with the right tool.
Got it. So we're talking about having the master data, the ID, the transactions, and then understanding the pain points, right? What are you trying to solve, right? Which could be a combination of things. I guess that is a really, so we went from basically no way of doing it to a very realistic, imperfect reality where we have data for catalogs, transactions, and a pain point to work. And then you're saying with the right model, we should be able to work with that, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Super.
Just make sure you have the fundamentals in place
Right.
and a problem that you're wanting to solve, that you truly need to solve.
So can you share us based on your experience, Jeromy, and I know you have a lot, is there, an experience where you remember an organization, that they turn a complicated situation, right, into
Yeah.
a success story where, it was not perfect, but they were able to work with what they had and turn it into something that gives them a lot of value.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm grinning because, there's an ideal client, right? The client with perfect data in one ERP, and they're using it for all their maintenance and all their procurement. And ideal just means, what I mean is easy, right?
Right.
But it's the complex one those are the people that need help, right? Is when it's a complex, complicated, messy situation. And that's really where we shine, is solving those problems. So there's easy, but there's much more reward when you can solve a complex problem. So we have a paper company, pulp and paper products, based in the UK, but they have a huge presence in the UK and in Europe. And over 40 plants. I forget exactly how many, but it's definitely more than 40 plants. A lot of acquisitions and mergers over the years. What that means is over 12 ERPs, none of them connected, none of them talking to each other. So 40 some odd plants, 12 ERPs, and I think there were around 20 EAMs or CMMSs, maintenance systems. And those weren't all connected to their ERPs, even if somebody had both. So you get where I'm going, right? A lot of disconnected systems. So when an organization has a strategy to reduce inventory, to reduce overhead, to eliminate waste, they didn't even have visibility. So we were able to ingest data from all of those maintenance systems and all 12 ERPs into one AI MRO solution that provided visibility corporate wide. What's their inventory value? And oh, by the way, using AI, this part over at plant A in Bristol is the same as this part over at plant B in Manchester. Look, do we need 20 at each side, or can we just store 3 or 4 centrally? So all of a sudden, we're able to solve problems that they never even imagined that they could solve just by having central visibility and the ability to view materials that they didn't even know were the same materials, because they weren't in the same system and they certainly had different descriptions. But our AI models were able to solve all that. But let me put this into perspective also. They could have just as easily said, well, they are going to a single ERP and a single maintenance system.
Right.
They could have just as easily said, we're going to do that first, then we'll worry about optimization. But by optimizing first, they're saving, they've only been live for about 6 months, but they've already saved north of $10 million. So in a year's time, let's call it 20 million, just for simple math. That working capital they've released, that inventory spend they haven't had to spend, that can now fund their migration to the single ERP.
Right.
Right. So anyway, so that was a huge success story and a very complex story problem to solve.
Wow, that sounds amazing, Jeromy. Thanks for sharing that. I think if I follow your lead, so basically it's a company that, and that's what we see out there, right? Companies that grow by acquisition, by different means, right? So they ended up with, 40 different sites, companies, organizations that have 12 ERP, maybe different EAMs as well. And then the ability to put everything together. Even though when it wasn't perfect, they knew that they had some real issues. But I think that the 3 things you mentioned, that they had the IDs, transactions, and the pain points, were clear enough. Then you were able to work with that data, provide them a value that they basically generated, tens of millions of dollars within 6 months. And then that money, it's capital that you basically freed up that they can use for whatever projects they might have. That sounds like a challenge and then some, right?
Yeah. They're not all that complex, but that was one of the more complex ones that we've had.
Well, and so I guess when we have that type of scenario, we're thinking about a perspective that, it has to go different time zones, languages, all that fun stuff, right?
Yes.
And I guess that's right. So interesting. And by the way, if you look at the results from the last survey, what do they see, right? And I think it says here that most of the folks see that they have excess inventory, right? That's interesting because I guess that's what we see a lot, right? In order to run, they just buy, not necessarily optimize it, and that's a major challenge.
Well, if you think about how a stocking policy is normally set, I as a maintenance guy, I go to the storeroom and I say, hey, we need this part. And they say, well, how many do we need to keep in stock? And I say, well, 5. And then years go by and we don't revisit that. What happens is years go by, production's down for some reason. I'm the maintenance guy that goes out to try to figure it out. And I realize, oh, I need that part. And then I go and we don't have it. So now instead of stocking 5, I say, well, let's make it 10.
Right.
So that's the emotional response that leads to overstocking instead of having a systemic, routine, documented way of saying, hey, this part needs my attention before it becomes a problem.
Right. Well, I'm going to share one of the experiences just to shed some light. I was in a meeting with the C-levels, right? This very, very interesting company. They have multiple sites. They have a large revenue. And we were having a conversation between the CFO and the COO, and they were talking about how much money they got tied up in inventory. And let's just pick a number. I'm going to use a number, to say they had $15 million. And then the CFO was kind of questioning, can we optimize that? And I don't think I will forget what the COO said. He said, we shouldn't worry whether those 15 right now need to go down, which we should. Worry that you have 15 million there and we're still stopping the plant, right? So even with that, we know that it's excess inventory today. Worry that we don't have enough. So we have to, let's save money, but balance correctly. So then we have the right MRO inventory parts at the right place.
That's right.
And not have all that money tied up, and we're still having issues of stockouts, right?
That's absolutely.
Super. So when we talk about real victories, right, and we start to wonder, right, what are the benefits? I think you mentioned a few of them, but when you're able to get it right, and I think right is not equal to perfect, right? You get it to a point where it's something, because you're never going to be perfect because life changes. Life throws you a curveball, or you add a plan, add a line, change a shift. There are many things going on because organizations are dynamic. So what are the benefits that when you see that this is implemented correctly, that you see out there?
Sure. Okay. You mentioned dynamic. I'm taking notes. It's got me thinking. But let me start with this. Consolidated inventory, visibility across a region, across a network of plants, across an organization, across numerous warehouses, feeds directly into broader organizational goals. And that is fewer stockouts, like as you just mentioned, right? Hey, we've got 15 million, but do we have enough of the right parts? So fewer stockouts on the parts that actually matter, and knowing which ones matter, and less waste sitting on the shelves as working capital. Well, before I finish that statement, I think it was Toyota, TP. Oh man, is it TPM? Yeah. So I think that's where I read this, but it was inventory is not an asset, though we keep it on our books as such. It's waste. It's working capital that isn't working, subject to deterioration, shrinkage, damage, and obsolescence. So that's a powerful statement, right? It's working capital that is not working. But stockouts are a huge problem. So finding that right balance is the biggest benefit that an organization can achieve. So visibility, knowing what materials they have, how critical they are to their business, is the biggest benefit. And I don't know if I don't think I've said this, but But don't think of optimization as a one-time thing. Okay, we stocked 5 of these, remember? And then I said we stocked out, so now we stocked 10. You said you used the word dynamic. Business is dynamic. Okay, so if that stocking level was good yesterday, well, what's changed tomorrow? We probably have a different supplier. There might be a war. There might be tariffs. The lead times, in other words, might be fluctuating greatly. So businesses are dynamic. Where this part is used may have changed from where it was used yesterday. Maybe it was on 2 assets, now it's used on 20. And one of those 20, if we don't have that asset running, the plant goes down, right? So a continuous model that continues to learn and find materials and present them to you that says, hey, this part needs your attention, it is at risk. Consumption patterns are changing. Your sourcing changed.
Right.
You better change, you better address this item. So having that kind of visibility is the benefit. It prevents stockouts, it reduces wasted working capital. Having the right part in the right place at the right time. Right.
Wow. That's really interesting. Yeah, because when we talk about, those benefits, like you said, it's going to affect different things at the same time, right? So we might have, working capital that we will definitely free up and be able to use for other things, but also the ability to, not having those stockouts that definitely can affect, the operations and productions. I guess the other one you also mentioned, it's, being able to make better decisions as the dynamic changes goes. And then I think, another thing that we see also, it's this is very helpful for purchasing, right? Because sometimes we leave purchasing, they're kind of, sometimes they're not part of the pictures as they should be in a reliability conversation. And I think it's important that, they're taken into consideration, because then they might also want to look at, free text POs. They wanted to, look at different things that if they don't have a consolidated, holistic view of what's going on, it's going to be really hard to do it.
Absolutely. And I agree wholeheartedly. You need, for a program to be successful, an MRO inventory optimization program to be successful, you want procurements buy-in, you want reliability and maintenance buy-in. And that's where criticality can really, and operations, you want that criticality can bridge that gap. Because when maintenance says, well, we need 5 of these, and you can show the data that says, based on your consumption, based on how it's sourced, based on X, Y, and Z, maybe you really only need 3, but the data should support that. But if you have alignment that we all agree that this is a less critical part, this is a more critical part, now we're all on the same team. We're all trying to achieve the same objective.
So then, following that lead, Jeromy, can I add one more benefit?
Yeah.
A happier place to be, happier place to work, because we're aligned, right? We will, we will have better relationships between the different departments. That the problems normally is that they have different KPIs, they have different metrics that they're measured against, right? So once we're able to solve that, it's not really one's against the other, it's everybody together towards the same goal, which if we have the right information and the right criticality, the model is going to tell us exactly what we need. And then we can all work together where it's not a fight anymore, whether, we have a meeting and then we say, hey, maybe we could lower this one, or maybe we can network it, right? From different sources, different plants. But what I see a lot, and I've been, and I'm sure you've seen it when you go into those conversations, sometimes they're very tense, right? Because people are afraid that, they're going to lose control of, where their operations feels that they won't have the right parts. And then purchasing and finance that we have in, buy-in and just getting more capital tied up in inventory.
That's right. That's
cool.
Right. Happier workplace.
Yeah, happier workplace. That's the one that I'm rooting for. That's one I like.
I like it.
It's like, those guys made us happier. So I'm sure we can improve the world, at least on that front. That's our
Absolutely.
That's our good deed for the day. And then one of the things that we also hear, Jeromy, have you run into where people might be a little bit concerned, or maybe the word is afraid, that artificial intelligence is going to replace them, right? It's like, if we put this Well, Jeromy, it sounds good. It seems like you know what you're doing, but then I'm going to be out of a job, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's been in the news a lot lately. My wife's in medicine, and there are a lot of jobs that, people feel are at risk, and I get it. The unique thing about, I'm going to preach a little bit. The unique
But
thing about MRO inventory and optimization, personally, I don't think it's stealing anybody's job. And I'm going to tell you why. There's simple math. This is not something I had to memorize. It's really easy math. But I use this story a lot when it comes to assessing MRO inventory, whether you're assessing criticality, whether you're assessing, do we have the right safety stock or reorder points? Do we have the right lead times? Is stocking 4 of this, is that the right answer? So I got some easy math for you. I used to use 2080, and I'd ask, the room, hey, what does that number mean? What does it mean to anybody? And, most people know that there's 2080 working hours in a year if you're working 40 hours a week for 52 weeks. But to make the math easier, I drop it to 2000. So let's assume you get a little vacation time. So 2000 working hours in a year times 60 minutes in an hour, that gets you 120,000. The reason I use that number is if you have one person working full time with no breaks, no lunches, no restroom breaks, no phone calls, not cycle counting, not issuing materials, not expediting parts, doing nothing but assessing each and every part. And if you have 120,000 parts, like a lot of our clients do, now some have as few as 10,000, some have as many as millions. One of our oil companies, millions of parts. But let's just make the math real easy. If you have 120,000 parts and you have 120,000 minutes in a year, if you do no other job, that gives you exactly 1 minute to review each material and to make sure that you understand its lead time, you understand its consumption history, you understand what bills and materials or assets it's ever been issued to. Is it used on corrective emergency work, or is it always used on planned work? Is 4 the right stocking level, or should it be 2 or 100? And does that supplier require me to buy 10 at a time, maybe a reorder quantity? You see where I'm going? In other words, it's not stealing a job if nobody's doing that job to begin with. Does that make sense? Because setting stocking levels is normally, most companies are not spending that much time and attention to doing it right. And if you spent 20 minutes, don't check me on the math, but if you spent 20 minutes per part, I think 120,000 parts, the last time I did that math, I think it's going to take you 40 years to evaluate each part properly. It can't be done. So it's not taking a job, it's doing a job that's not getting done today, which leaves the human free to review the recommendations that are coming out, which is quick. That's minutes. To say, yep, I agree. Hey, it makes sense. No, I disagree. It frees that human to continue to cycle count and change the bins around and better negotiate pricing and change how they're sourcing, make sure things are bought on contract, reduce the free text POs, reduce the P card purchases, and to do their jobs more focused and get rid of this headache that's dangling out there, not getting addressed today. Now, I got a little preachy, but does that make sense?
Hey, preach on, brother.
Okay.
Love all of that. So we're not only making it a happier place to work, we're also making sure that the work is used in the effective, let's say, area. So it's not only basically helping them, but it's also making sure that they don't spend that time tied up in doing the things which, by the way, I don't think you could review a part in a minute because you need much more context than that. But let's say you could, even though if I was a machine, then we're saying the model should take care of that. We should be able to take that into consideration and then spend the time in things that add value, and then making sure that you have the right vendors, that you have working with the different folks in the different departments, and we're really sync to take this to the next level.
That's right. Absolutely. It makes somebody more efficient and lets them spend their time on the things that matter. Human intervention.
Right. Perfect. So for people that are considering this journey, Jeromy, what would you think that would be the three recommendations? Three things that you could tell them. Hey, take into consideration these three things, and that should increase your probability of success. What would that be?
Well, the first comes to mind. I mentioned it earlier, and that is there is a conception or a misconception that my data needs to be perfect. Don't treat a full data cleanse as a prerequisite. It's not. Start where the pain already is. So that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, connect the dots that are usually missing. I say usually. Document your parts usage to work orders. Document those work orders to the correct assets, not building number one, not production line number one, but asset number two, right?
Yeah.
So get the fundamentals in place. It's not a prerequisite, but hey, if you're worried about your probability of success, so don't worry about a full data cleanse. That's a moving target when AI can understand the data. Second, I'm going to repeat it, connect the dots that are likely already missing. Just some very easy fundamentals. That linkage is going to tell you why that part matters and not just how it moves. Third, get material criticality assessed. Now, I'm not saying you have to use our solution and go our direction, but a one and done, you can do that for assets. You can say, hey, this production asset is A, critical. Okay. In most industries, that doesn't change too often.
Right.
It changes, but not too often. Parts, this part is used on that asset, it's used on that asset. And oh, by the way, we added a very critical production asset today, and it happens to use the same material. Maybe it's a bearing, 6308, rolling element, SKF. Right. So where materials are used changes a lot. How they're used as you have aging assets, or new reliability program. How materials are used changes a lot. How they're sourced changes a lot. So criticality, in my opinion, should be a living, continuously automated thing to see how these parts are being consumed and why and to what assets. So criticality, I think, is probably what I would consider the third. But even if you just have a rough pass, static, one time criticality assessment, a pressure safety valve is more critical than a cleaning supplies, right? So some rough pass is fine to start with, but you don't need a full data cleanse. AI can understand the data. Connect the basic dots that are probably in your data, your trackability. And then the third one is get at some basic understanding of criticality.
Right.
That drives everything. Your min-max settings, what you're going to stock, what's okay to stock out of, all those other things.
Oh, interesting. So if I take into consideration those three things, that you have at least a working model, right? And I guess based on that, the things that we normally say, it's when you compare, starting from scratch to a model that's already been out there and mature. I think there's a few things, right? Because the models, if you start from scratch today, you will have to first create a model that takes into consideration those things, but also that it learns and it has enough learning, not only with my data, because my data set is going to be limited, but if I'm able to feed into the data of others, then I should have not only a better model taking into consideration those issues, but also through the years, having that abundant data, be able to have a stronger prediction engine, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. And if you think about whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or any of them, you think of the open source, all these AI models, and what makes them good at what they do. Because 3 years ago, you wouldn't have gotten the quality of answers that you get today. And so why did it get so much better so quickly? Because it needs massive amounts of data, and it needs time for the models to learn. So if you're going to have an MRO specific AI model that understands the unique, again, we've covered a lot of them, but the very unique challenges of MRO inventory, you need to give it tons of data and tons of time for it to learn and make solid recommendations. And And that's what we've done for 10 years now, is a very specific model that solves one problem and one problem only, and that's understanding MRO inventory. You're not going to be able to do that with open sources. And I'm not saying don't try. I'm not saying don't leverage them. I'm just saying just keep that in mind.
Super. And to be closing up, Jeromy, any final recommendations, final message that you would like to leave the audience with before we let them go?
Yeah, I've preached a lot, so I'll stop preaching, but I will say that, I'm going to recap a little bit. Don't wait on perfect data. I've been in maintenance for 46 years. I was in the Marines doing maintenance, by the way, and they do it really well, but I still tell you, nobody has perfect data. If you wait for that, think about all the value you're missing in the meantime. And I'm going to repeat part of that quote. Inventory isn't an as such. It's working capital that is not working. It's waste. So if you can control that, right size it, while at the same time finding the right balance to say, hey, we might take these 10 parts away. You probably have too many, Mr. Maintenance Guy, but hey, we've identified where you're short on some really important parts. So let's shift that capital around, make sure we have the right balance. But if you're waiting for your data to be perfect to start that, that's the value you're missing out: uptime and reduced waste. And you can do that in parallel with improving your data. There's always value in improving your data, but don't wait for it to be perfect.
Perfect. So it's don't wait up, start as soon as you can, and make the most of it. That's interesting. That's right. I appreciate, and amen to that, brother. And as we put in the final closing, we're going to put a survey in case you guys are interested. I think we want to open it up to see anybody has any questions. Si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, because we want to also make sure that if there's any questions out there, we take them into account. I know we got some limited time with Jeromy, but he's been kind enough to share his knowledge and preach to us in the right manner. I got one here that came to me directly, Jeromy, is hold on. It says basically, what would be the best way to talk to my boss and convince him that now is the right time to do this? What would you say to this person?
Yeah, that's a very fair question. And really, I mentioned something before about, is there a pain? So and remember this: feeling pain is not saying, hey, I have too many, my warehouse, right? My pantry in the kitchen. Pain is not saying I have too much food in my pantry. Pain is that, hey, my bread is getting moldy and rotting. It's depreciating. Right. It's deteriorating. And then, okay, that hits my checkbook. Make sure there's an identifiable pain. Are we having stockouts? Is that documented? A lot of times when I was preaching reliability, production line 1 was down. Why? Oh, maintenance. There's the checkbox. Wait, why? Okay, this failed. Well, why did it fail? So you've got to tie it to a pain. You've got to understand the pain. Otherwise, you're not going to get action. So just saying that we need more inventory, you're not going to get buy-in. Saying that we need to reduce inventory, you're not going to get buy-in. Document the pain, make sure somebody's feeling it, and it's tied to a KPI. If you can do that, you're ready to go to leadership and say, we need a solution. Awesome.
There was another question. Thanks for that, Jeromy. So understand the pain and then tie the dots, as you were saying. We got a question here. In a large-scale MRO management, should organization keep investing in formal root cause analysis for missed deadlines and excess inventory? Or can AI create enough value by detecting actionable signals or insights?
Yeah, I'm all for RCFA and understanding failures and failure modes. At the same time, it's connected, it's related to understanding what materials need to be available and when. But I don't think they have to be dependent upon each other. Okay. If you're optimizing with the right solution, you're going to know where you're at risk. You're going to increase the stocking levels. The thing is, you got to remember this. When our solution, when we are saying, hey, you need to increase stock here, well, that's a cost. Yeah, it sure is. But if you stock out, you're going to buy the part anyway, and you're going to pay a premium for it, and you're going to expedite it. You're going to pay twice as much what it would have cost if you would have had it in the first place, right? So now when a failure does occur and you are optimal, then yeah, now we should probably do some root cause analysis to understand why we failed. But optimize first, then seek to understand if there are further failures.
Oh, super. That's a great answer. Thank you for that. Yeah, because I guess we're saying that, they're not necessarily dependent. You can do both, and you can derive a lot of value from just having the criticality, right?
That's correct.
You should be good with that. Okay, Marilyn, can we put in podemos poner la encuesta final in case if we don't have any more questions? I'm excited to share this knowledge with you guys. Vamos a poner aquí un QR para una encuesta final, so you guys can take a look at it, see if you can basically answer it in case you want to be able to talk a little bit more. I think we could do also some analysis based on experiences, right? We can help them build a case, a business case for them to understand what would that mean for their organization, right? So that is something that we can help them out in based of their needs, and we can help every organization. So maybe you want to spend a minute or two talking about that.
Yeah, me and my teams over 10 years have been benchmarking every client. So every industry vertical that we interact with, every company, every production facility, you name it, we benchmark where they're at. It's anonymized. But if we get basic information from a client, we can use all that benchmarking to say, hey, this is directionally what you stand to gain by optimizing.
Okay. Super. I guess there was a question, but it wasn't for us. So I don't know if there are any more questions. If not, guys, we appreciate everybody for joining us. There's the survey, hay una encuesta para que la puedan llenar. In case you're interested, we could talk to Jeromy, and then definitely we will be glad to share the recording. Obviously, we're doing this in Spanglish. Jeromy, I want to thank you for your time, for your words of wisdom, for your guidance, and I think we have a very interesting crowd that joined us today. Thank you for your time, Jeromy, and for putting this. ¿Algo más, Marilyn, o estamos listos ya para ir cerrando?
Estamos listos, ahí esperamos sus respuestas en la encuesta, y pues muchísimas gracias a todos por acompañarnos.
Muchas gracias a todos. Well, thank you, Jeromy. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you for the team. Everybody have a good afternoon, and we'll keep going. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good to see you. Take care. Thank you, everybody.